leaving out a southbound station. Night is sleeping on the track, passing broad and leafy working fields, yellow lights and tumbled shacks, men in taverns smoking cigarettes, drinking whiskey glasses dry, clap each other joking on the back, complain about their wives. If the sky fell tonight, would I even notice? If the sky fell tonight, would I feel more devoted to the beauty in this life? Maybe say a prayer. If the sky fell tonight, would I even care? Something in the wind calls my name, though I never was a rolling stone. Time to get away from everything, free the spirit, lose the home. But it's so hard to let it go. Grass felt soft under my feet. Now the wheels clacking on the rails gently call out my dreams, my dreams. If the sky fell tonight, would I even notice? If the sky fell tonight, would I feel more devoted? Lord, I feel something holy coming on down the line. Answer to the burning question, shedding all its disguise. Soon the rosy glow of early morn, like candlelight in a darkened church. These clouds slipping by one, bend many roads on this search, on this search. If the sky fell tonight, would I even notice? If the sky fell tonight, would I feel more devoted the beauty in this life? Maybe say a prayer. If the sky fell tonight, would I even care? If the sky fell tonight, if the sky fell to earth tonight,
From Talkeetna, Alaska to West Palm Beach, Florida, you are listening to River City Folk, a weekly broadcast of live performance, musical influences, and interview. I'm your host, Tom May, this week on Powell Boulevard at Cafe Artichoke in Portland, Oregon. So good, as always, to be back in the friendly confines of artichoke music. Michael Henchman is my guest. He began the program with a song called If the Sky Fell. Michael, you've been doing music for a long time, and not just your singer-songwriter stuff, but all kinds of different music that you've used to keep body and soul together through the decades. You began playing bass. That was your first introduction to being on stage?
Correct, yes.
And you played bass with all different kinds of ensembles, from what I understand.
I did. I started playing bass in middle school. At that year, I was actually, the year my father was in Vietnam, actually, and we were living in Bremerton at the time. And the director of the band there for the middle school band was really into Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass. And so he formed a middle school big band, not quite a full big band, but pretty close. I think we had 16 members. And that's where I started playing bass.
Well, what a valuable experience for you. And the thing about a bass player can always find work. Guitar players, not so much. Bass players never have any trouble getting a gig. So a very useful skill that you developed, along with lots of other useful skills in that time of your life. When did you first begin to feel comfortable about playing your own compositions, these kind of compositions in front of people?
Sure. I did a little bit of that in my early 20s as part of when I was playing in bands as a bass player. I would sometimes take a partial acoustic set and that sort of thing. But I got into jazz for a lot of years and wasn't writing in this vein probably until 14, 15 years ago. It really started probably about 10 years ago when I really felt comfortable coming out front.
And this place was a big part of that.
Absolutely.
Portland, Oregon, and Artichoke Music in particular was a big part of you feeling comfortable through the Friday night sessions that they do on stage where people can play some of their new songs. That's a really important part of what happens here at Artichoke Music. You've got a recording that had meant a lot to you that always makes me smile each time I hear it. What a memorable piece of music this is, and of course, written by Jimmy Webb, the Wichita lineman, sung here by Glenn Campbell. What is it in particular about this song that resonates with your development as a songwriter?
It's interesting. That came out the year I was going into high school, and the previous year was when Sgt. Pepper, the Beatles, had been released, and I was just really starting to listen to arrangements, not just the songs and the melodies, perhaps, but all the sort of textural stuff that was going on behind the scenes was fascinating to me. And when Wichita Lineman came out, there was something about that forlorn lyric and a sense of being on the plains. I had driven cross country several times on our family moves with my father, so I'd seen a lot of the country in the Midwest. And that song just really, really spoke to me, as well as the arrangements just blew my mind with all the strings and what was happening there. And so I wore out my 45 record, wore right through the grooves, I think.
I am a lineman for the county, and I drive the main road, searching in the sun for another overload.
High up on Red Oak Ridge, there's a ribbon in a tree, left there by a woman I knew as the summer went to sleep. As the summer went to sleep. She was born in a thunderstorm, a tempest in bone china cup, nerves of steel, but a tender heart, with a love that filled me up. With a love that filled me up. She had been out on the running road, and though she didn't plan to stay, leather and lace, and found a home, set her feet upon this place. But autumn kept its appointment with sky impossibly blue. She slipped away without a single word, like a spirit passing through. In the ghost pines, there's a shadow in the trees. For a long time, trying to catch up to me. In the ghost pines, it's a place I know. Through the long night, where it passes slow. In my dreams, now and then, I hear a sweet voice over wind and snow. I stumble towards that forsaken hill, try to bring her down from the cold. But 100 days or 100 years, it's a spell you cannot break. Once a ghost in that nether world, no heroes, no escape. In the ghost pines, there's a shadow in the trees. For a long time, trying to catch up to me. In the ghost pines, it's a place I know. Through the long night, where it passes slow. High up on Red Oak Ridge, there's a ribbon in a tree, left there by a woman I knew as the summer went to sleep. Thank you.
You are listening to River City Folk. I'm your host, Tom May. We heard two pieces of music in that set, beginning with Glenn Campbell singing the immortal Jimmy Webb song, The Wichita Lineman. He was followed by my guest today in Portland, Oregon, Michael Henchman, with a song called Ghost Pines. I'm kind of reminded of an old British Irish ballad there in that, with the subject matter and the ethereal feeling of that tune. What's the story behind that song, Michael?
Well, in part, I've been fascinated for a very long time with the idea of, I know it's going to sound kind of scientific, but multiverses and parallel universes, as well as more esoteric mythological themes of slipping through the crack between the worlds, so to speak. And when I was writing this song, I just found myself going down that avenue of not only a lost love, but someone who loses a love for that reason. It's somehow she slips in between two worlds and can't be found. And so...
It's a beautiful song. You ought to send that to the Outlander people. It's a great tune, really good. So we mentioned early on the songs that you've written since coming here to Portland, and those songs have resulted in a couple of recording projects and are going to result in another one before too very long. So the two projects that you have out right now are 40 Miles from Midnight, right?
Yes,
correct. And the first one, which we'll be hearing a song from very soon. The EP is called?
It's called Near and Far.
But those have both given you a lot of visibility in the Portland songwriting community.
Yeah,
so, yes. and you did it at Rob Stroop's studio, and I think the arrangements are very, very artfully done.
Great, thank you. Yeah.
You have another recording for us to hear today, Michael, and this is by an old friend of mine from up in Canada. And certainly this album had so much of an impact on so many folks. Joni Mitchell's Court and Spark album, it's hard to maximize the impact that so many people gained from the production, from the songs, from the sound of this album. When did you first hear it?
I heard it in '74 when it came out. Yeah, and And again, in part because of my background at that time, playing a lot of jazz, I was aware of Joni and aware of course, I loved listening to James Taylor and Gordon Lightfoot and Carly Simon and so on. But I wasn't that keyed into what was going on in the folk music scene, much more than what I was hearing on the radio. And then a friend of mine said, "You got to hear Joni's new album." And when I listened to that and the work she was doing with the LA Express and John Garrett on drums, it just blew me out, just completely. And then after that, she was totally on my radar. It was just a fantastic record.
It really built a bridge between jazz and folk that didn't really exist at that point, at least not in the mass perception level.
I think so. I think you're right. Yeah.
Anyway, this song that you decided you wanted us to hear is the title cut from the album. And what is it about this particular song that you enjoy so much?
I just enjoyed the piano work, and she is so incredibly good. And I was learning this back then at that time with her metaphor and her use of lyrics, and just the idea of a chord and spark, the spark of love, courting someone. I just, that was in that lyric, and I thought that was just, it spoke to me in terms of its cleverness of the lyric as well as the amount of emotional connection she manages in her music.
Love came to my door with a sleeping roll and a madman's soul. He thought for sure I'd seen him dancing up a river.
Late spring of 57, sun and rain in a perfect dance for growing the golden grain that my father's father knew. After 10 years of hard times and debts of circumstance, his ship was finally coming home. Skies were cobalt blue. Summer came rolling in on a glorious wave of light. Days flowed together like a river passing through. Grandpa loved those barley fields shimmering in his eyes. Living east of Fargo, harvest couldn't come too soon. There's a bargain against the barley, handshake might seem firm. Bargain against the barley, and no one can know the terms. Fate's a gamble, borrowed luck, the dealer takes his due. Always a bargain against the barley, waiting for a rendezvous. On a lazy Thursday afternoon, another soft rain like before. But then clouds grow green and dark, sound of distant drum. Cold wind is whipping up, better check the cellar door. Racing to shut the barn, something wicked this way comes. A beast is roaring across the plains, slamming through sleepy towns. Stones fly from heaven, splinters driven into trees. Black fingers stabbing into earth, ripping fertile ground. As they tear out summer's roots, leaving nothing to be seen. Grandpa shudders to his knees. There's nothing to be seen. Oh, there's a bargain against the barley buried in the earth. Bargain against the barley, hardest lesson to be learned. Fate's a gamble, borrowed luck, the dealer takes his due. Always a bargain against the barley, waiting for a rendezvous. Another year, then another, slow to renew. Always a bargain against the barley, best count your blessings few.
Music that makes a difference on River City Folk. I'm your host, Tom May. We heard two pieces of music there, beginning with Joni Mitchell's timeless piece, Court and Spark. She was followed by my guest today, Michael Henchman, with a newer song of his called Bargain Against the Barley. And you are listening to River City Folk this week at Cafe Artichoke in Portland, Oregon on Powell Boulevard in the City of Roses. A big thanks to Gary Furlow recording today's program here at Artichoke Music, and to all the people listening around the country, in particular back in my hometown, my old hometown of Omaha, Nebraska, on radio station KIOS, public radio for the eastern Nebraska area there. Thanks for tuning in to the show. Michael, that song that you just played for us should resonate with a lot of the Nebraska listeners back there with that mention of barley and raising the crops, and I thought perhaps it had to do with directly your lineage, but it actually doesn't. It comes from a story that by some friends you know.
It comes from a story. I had just an inkling of an idea from talking to someone a while ago, and this is one of those songs that we, when we're crafting a lyric and exploring a story, I found as I was writing this that I ended up setting it in the post-war 50s era, and then as often happens, or at least happens sometimes, I like, maybe I should fact check a few things here. And got to, and just out of interest, and so I got to doing some research online after writing the song and found that indeed, in the 1950s, one of the biggest tornadoes to ever hit the upper Midwest passed through in 1957. And this was one of the storms that was being studied by a young Japanese researcher who had come to the U.S. to study meteorology, named Ted Fujita. And he pioneered what is known as the F scale for measuring tornado strength. And when he went back in the 60s and back-checked this particular storm, it was one of the largest of the century. And so I found it very interesting that I was exploring this story, and then after the fact found out that it was largely true, again, because of this bud of an idea I had gotten from a friend.
Particularly timely right now, too, after this huge storm with flat level winds just went through the Midwest a couple of weeks ago as we're recording this show in late August 2020. But so a very, very appropriate song for the time that we live in.
Yeah.
So, Michael, you have a song about traveling. We really haven't talked much about your traveling, but you've done a good deal of it in your life. And one of the places that you talk about very romantically is the Midwest, as you portrayed in that most recent song. Sure. And we're going to go back to the Midwest for this recording of yours that we're about to hear. Yes. What was the story behind this one?
It was grew out of that same love of traveling across the country as a child. In that area in Iowa and Indiana, there's lots and lots of cornfields. And when I was traveling with my father, late afternoons, especially after the heat has come down, we've got the windows open in the old station wagon, and these rows of corn were actually set oftentimes at an angle to the road. And so as I'm as a kid, we're driving by, I can just see row after row after row after row. And with the windows open, could begin to hear the insects buzzing and that warm air kind of settling down. Anybody who's ever been in the Midwest knows what this feels like in late summer. And then the fireflies are starting to come out. And it really struck me as a young child and stayed with me, that feeling of going cross country. And so when I set this song, when I set the stage for this particular song, I set it in Indiana for that reason.
Michael Henchman on River City Folk with a recording of his called Indiana Road.
500-foot radio tower on this Indiana road.
belting out its signal near and far. I'm hanging on to every last word of that lonesome song. Mandolin and fiddle, pedal steel guitar. Out on a dusty hill, church is going up. The trusses stand like bleached bones, drying in wind. And how can something new seem to be so old? How can something familiar be a place you've never been? And I'm coming home to you. Got a long way to go, but I see your smile and everything around. Counting down red silos on this Indiana road, and passing through these quiet country towns. There's nothing like being homeward bound. Trees warding the highway, broken by last year's storm. Lives have been uprooted, there are still some who mourn. But there is hope, new bright smiles in that devastation. People shoulder up, pull together, find salvation. And I'm coming home to you, on this Indiana road. I can almost see you now by our blue kitchen door. Garden gloves set aside, meadows full of grays, and yellow summer dresses, fresh with your sweetness. The evening settles in to warm embrace, and I'm coming home to you. Got a long way to go, but I see your smile and everything around. Counting down red silos on this Indiana road, passing through these quiet country towns. There's nothing like being homeward bound. There's nothing like being homeward bound. And I'm coming home to you on this Indiana road.
Michael Henchman on River City Folk with Indiana Road. Thanks very much for tuning into the program today. One of the people who has played here at Artichoke in the old days was my great pal and good friend, Dave Carter, and his partner Tracy Grammer, who left a huge imprint here in Portland, Oregon, and nationally in the acoustic music scene. And Dave really became a model for you as a songwriter when you first heard him, Mr. Henchman.
Yes, it was actually as a result of hearing Tracy's album initially that was released after Dave passed away, when she released an album of his songs, the album called Flower of Avalon, which came out in 2005. That really was my first exposure to Dave's music through a friend who turned me on to that record. And then, I progressed from there. And of course, moving to Portland, I heard so much more about them. But the songs on that particular record were so beautifully done and so beautifully produced. It really was yet another a little turning point in what what I was doing and the way I was exploring composition and the way I was hearing the way I wanted to arrange things.
I was pleased that you chose this song because it's not as well known as many of his pieces are. It's a song called Hard to Make It. And I'm curious as to why, out of all of his songs, that you chose this particular one.
I think it just speaks, for me, such a huge state, the way things are in the world today. That term, hard to make it in this world today, is just, for so many people, that's very true. And I think the theme of that was mostly what made me choose that particular song. I love all the songs on that record. The arrangements are wonderful. But that particular song just speaks to, what's happening in the present.
The Dave Carter song, Hard to Make It, sung here by his partner, Tracy Grammer, still out on the road. Our dear friend Tracy doing such a great job on River City Folk.
Lonesome stranger, won't you share my bed? The sidewalk siren at the bus stop said, love is a tear in a salty bay, and it's hard to make it in this world today.
Tearing dust from desert floor, darkness draped on billboard signs, city bursting out up ahead, 1,000 points of light. Air slides cool around my neck, moon chasing Galileo's dream, car been humming all night long, sure as a fine machine. When you're gonna stop your running, she asked me. Come on back to this town. But I'm 40 miles from midnight and 1,000,000 more from clear sight. No sign of slowing down. And you're sleeping by that rumbling street where water drips and the door is loose. Couldn't talk you into this trip out west. So much to feel, so hard to choose. How far back the memory goes, it's truly hard to say. Oh, it's hard to say. These old two lanes from another time, it's where I know my way. Wish that I could give up this wandering, but no place feels like home. Rocks in my shoes never bothered me. It's better like this, I know. You're gonna stop your running, she asked me, won't you come on back to this town? But I'm 40 miles from midnight and 1,000,000 more from clear sight. no sign of slowing down. Yes, I'm 40 miles from midnight and a million more from clear sight. Ain't going back to that town. Thank you.
You are listening to River City Folk, a weekly broadcast of live performance, musical influences, and interview. I'm your host, Tom May. Gary Furlow behind the board today here at Artichoke Music in Portland, Oregon on Powell Boulevard. Michael Henchman is my guest today. We heard two pieces of music there, beginning with Tracy Grammer performing the Dave Carter song, Hard to Make It, and that was followed by Michael's title cut of his CD that came out a couple years back called 40 Miles from Midnight. So, Michael, we've talked a lot about the Great Plains and we've talked about the Pacific Northwest, but we haven't talked about a place where you spent a good many years of your life, the beautiful town, the unusual locale of Fairbanks, Alaska. How did you ever wind up there in the first place?
I went up to work on the Trans-Alaska Pipeline in the pipeline year, so I went up there in 1974. Yeah.
And you spent a good long while up there, and you really explored what it was like to be a performing musician and play lots of different kinds of music up there. What was the scene like in Fairbanks in those days?
Back then, it was kind of like a modern-day version of the Gold Rush. I mean, the town was just, actually Anchorage as well, but the town was just inundated with thousands of workers coming through to go out on these various jobs in the pipeline camp. Some of them were working through the union halls. Some of them were working, regular jobs. So the town just burgeoned, much like a gold mining town would. And of course, all the vices that go along with that were happening in the modern day as well.
Which must have been pretty interesting for a musician making their living at that time.
Oh, absolutely. It was very interesting. Pretty wild. Downtown Fairbanks was a pretty wild place.
And assuming, I know that you were also working a regular job at that time, so you were playing music and doing a regular job. So I assume there were a few years there where you didn't get a lot of sleep.
That would be true, and certainly in the summer when the sun doesn't go down, we have quite a bit of daylight, and the sun just drops below the horizon for a couple hours at the height of summer.
But now you've been down here in the Pacific Northwest for a good few years. Do you miss that country up there?
I do still. I was there for a long time, and I have a lot of good friends up there still, and I've managed to go back up for a few visits, and so it kind of got into my blood,
At least you can hop on Alaska Airlines and make a change over there in Anchorage or Juneau and get there without too much trouble.
Right, exactly. It was there last summer, as a matter of fact.
You brought in one more recording for us here today, Michael, and I'm so enamored with this songwriter myself. He's a person that's not mentioned often, kind of a musician's musician, you might say, a fellow who lives in Nashville by the name of Daryl Scott. Right. How did you become familiar with his music?
It was actually by accident. I think a friend of mine may have mentioned him. It was as I was working on my 40 Miles record, actually, and working with Rob Stroop and becoming aware of some really great session musicians here in Portland. My friend Jean-Pierre Garreau and keyboards and pedal steel players and so on. And about that time, somebody said, "You need to listen to Daryl Scott." I did not know who he was, and I was completely just blown away by his talent set, his skill set. He plays 9 or 10 instruments, usually plays almost all the instruments on his records, except I think for drums. And his voice is such a rich baritone voice and a really great songwriter with a solid Americana feel, and I really was quite taken with what he was doing.
He's one of these guys that as a musician and a songwriter, you just got to hate the guy because he's so good at everything. I mean, he's an amazing player. I'm really pleased you brought in one of his recordings for us to hear and for people who are not familiar with him to listen to. This particular song is called "Tonight I'm Missing You." of all of his songs, because he has a number of recordings out.
Sure.
What is it about this song that attracts you to it?
I love the feel and the way that it starts out very, very light and has just a soft brush feel. But of course, the theme of the song, Tonight I'm Missing You, and he has a way of writing lyrics that are just so evocative. It's not like, I'm missing you, honey. I mean, he has this beautiful way of expressing that emotion, and just the way he layered the instruments in that recording. There's places where just a few things come and go, just here and there, little tones, little textures. It creates this beautiful flow and this beautiful tapestry, and that's kind of his hallmark anyway. But that song really spoke to me for that reason.
Daryl Scott on River City Folk with Tonight I'm Missing You.
Tonight I'm missing you. Nothing original, nothing new. Yeah, I got better things to do.
Down on the Gulf of Mexico, sun comes up, breezes blow, start of another day. Waking up along the bay, these sleepy towns get their coffee on, shaking off the night and feeling strong. There's a man at dawn out in white surf, hook and line takes his turn. He's out there every day, standing alone as he casts away, and shrimpers go sailing by, heading out on the morning tide. Down on the Gulf of Mexico, days are long, time moves slow. People aren't rich, they tell you so. Simple way of life, and they all know. Never have to worry about the undertow. Down on the Gulf of Mexico, got a lazy feel, but people work hard. Salt of the earth, they don't stray too far, counting out their days. Don't have a lot to say. Child skins his knee, has a good cry. Sister reaches out to hold him tight. Down on the Gulf of Mexico. Days are long and time moves slow. Men lean back in old wooden chairs, smile lines run deep, spinning tall tales without a care, late into the evening. Such a beautiful sky when it turns indigo, trading its treasure of red and gold. End of another day, gonna get down on my knees and pray. A million stars shine with heavenly light, wheeling overhead till they're out of sight. Down on the Gulf of Mexico, days are long, time moves slow. People aren't rich, they tell you so. Simple way of life, and they all know. Never have to worry about the undertow. Down on the Gulf of Mexico. Never have to worry about the undertow. Down on the Gulf of Mexico.
Boy, that was a really unexpected modulation in that song, and every time it came along, I got the biggest kick out of it because I was never ready for that exact jump that you made in that tune.
In the chorus.
Yes, yeah, very, very novel. I that was very cool. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Oh, thank
you
you.
so much for that, Michael. So we heard two pieces of music there on River City Folk, beginning with Daryl Scott, "Tonight I'm Missing You." That was followed by my guest today, Michael Henchman, on River City Folk with a song called "On the Gulf." So, Michael, you do have another recording project that you're in the process of preparing now to record.
That's correct.
And a number of the songs that you played today are newer songs that will be featured on that.
That is also correct, yes. Yeah.
But you have a website that people can go to this very moment around the country and find the recordings that you have that are already available. So perhaps you could give us that information.
That's michaelhenchman.com is the website.
And it's spelled Henchman,
singular, and .com, yeah.
And I assume there's also a contact button there, so people that heard you on the program can drop you a line, whether they're up in Alaska, your old home state, or other places in the United States. So I always encourage people to do that. The musicians who have played the program love to hear from people who tuned it in on the radio. So please give that a shot and let Michael know that you appreciated his music. Michael, you're going to give us one more song to take us out, and this is going to be on your keyboard that you brought along, which is cool because we don't get to hear many keyboard songs on River City Folk. So what is this last song going to be?
This is called Love Always Finds Someone.
And keyboard is something that is an instrument that you've used frequently, not just in this kind of music, but in jazz as well.
Primarily in this kind of music, actually. I was mostly playing bass in jazz. So I found that I was picking out pop songs on piano when I was young, and it's carried through into sort of this kind of music when I need to play keyboards in these kinds of arrangements. That's what I tend to do.
Michael Henchman on River City Folk at Cafe Artichoke in Portland, Oregon on Powell Boulevard today.
In the shadows of an old city staircase, with the rain promising to flood, a love letter lost in the dirt and the dark, whispering of hearts undone. An arc of light or bounding steeplechase, never know just how it will come. Dancer on a hillside or a lightning spark, might as well try to catch the sun. Love waits for no one, but love always finds someone. It's a matter of faith, and it may not stay, but love always finds someone. I held you once for 1,000 yesterdays. Shining new life had begun. We still believed floating like stars. The days and seasons were young. Well, it's hard to pull back when it's falling away. Words get trapped on the tongue. Mountains seem to tremble. Sky falls apart. The water must roar till it's done. Love waits for no one, but love always finds someone. It's a matter of faith, and it may not stay, but love always finds someone. Love always finds someone. You know that love always finds someone again. Love always finds someone again. Thank you so much. Thank you.